let us get started today. We are happy that you're joining us on this rainy Saturday afternoon. I'm Michael Munson, Forge's Executive Director and all-around worker bee. I'm really happy to have you all here today and to have Caleb here to talk about staying active outdoors, especially during the quarantine and COVID-19. So I just wanted to share with folks that this is part of a series of events that's sponsored by Forge and the Medical College of Wisconsin's Inclusion Health Clinic. We received some funding around COVID from the Advancing a Healthier Wisconsin endowment from the Medical College of Wisconsin. So this is allowing us to have kind of a unique set of programming about Ask the Experts and about connecting for folks to connect on a deeper level to help reduce isolation and keep people more grounded and safe and sane. So we are really happy again that you're here. I wanted to go over a couple of Zoom basics. I know a lot of us are really familiar with Zoom by this time in the process of being sequestered, but if folks are willing to find the chat bar, it's usually at the bottom of your screen, and would folks be willing to type in what your favorite outdoor activity is? So I'm seeing hiking, riding bike, walking, watching sunsets. That's beautiful. Yeah, walking, yoga. Yep, excellent. It looks like a lot of you have found the chat box. That's perfect. The other way that you can interact with us today is by raising your hand. So again, it's usually one of those buttons along the bottom of the screen. And so you know the drill if you've been here before. Can you try raising your hand just to make sure that we've got everybody can interact that way if they would like to? Perfect. Great. I'm going to turn things over right away to Caleb, who has made a really beautiful presentation. I'm really kind of jealous of how beautiful it is. Not jealous, but in awe of how beautiful it is. Caleb is one of our staff members and was an intern and then ended up being able to join us again earlier this year because of COVID and coming back home from school. So we are really thrilled that Caleb can join us today as well as ongoing. So Caleb, please share more about yourself and take us away. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. I just want to make sure, can everybody hear and see me okay? And that the screen is showing up all right. Just checking. Okay, awesome. Yeah, so I'll get started. So I thought I would just do a brief introduction about myself. So my name's Caleb. I use he, him pronouns. I started working with Forge about a year ago, over last summer. And one of the things that I started doing last summer was working on a program called Forge Outdoors. And that is an outdoors program geared towards the trans community in Wisconsin. People within the trans community, friends, family, loved ones, offering free outdoor events. So we did a lot of things like hiking, bike rides, beach days, surfing, rock climbing. We had a lot of really cool opportunities in the community. So I'm really happy I got to get some people involved with that last summer. And that for me was kind of inspired by the structure of a similar program at the college that I attend that offered other like not free, but low cost outdoor events for students, led by students. And one of the things that I noticed about that was that it was not particularly inclusive or explicitly inviting towards the trans community. And I think for a lot of people that can be a barrier to not seeing people who look like you or share your experience in the outdoors world. So that was certainly something I hoped could be a more inviting element of Forge Outdoors, that it is explicitly for trans people and people within the community. So that's something I was really excited about doing. Another piece of the work I've done with Forge is working on the community needs assessment. So we started that at Pride Fest Milwaukee in 2019, asking people to take surveys, which were fairly long, but we collected a lot of really interesting information. And of a lot of different data we collected, one of the notable things that was that people are looking for different kinds of interactions within the community. And 47% of people who took the survey were interested in participating in social groups, and 34% were interested in topic-focused groups. So another element of Forge Outdoors and all kinds of outdoor activities is the social element and creating a good social environment for people, again, to connect, and especially with other people who share certain lived experiences. So that's a little bit about my work with Forge. Otherwise, I love outdoor activities, and that's kind of why I'm talking about them today. Some of my other interests are hiking, rock climbing, biking, backpacking, and camping. So the focus of today's session is staying active during quarantine. And I first want to talk about what staying active means. And I want to point out that this looks different for everyone. I think a lot of us might have an idea of exercise or staying active that might look like training for a run or something, running outside, or lifting weights at the gym, which can be more intense forms of activity. But all of us have different ways of staying active in our daily lives that don't have to involve really strenuous activity. Something as simple as going for a morning walk or an afternoon walk, or stretching, or dancing in your house, just different things we can do to incorporate in our routines that look different for everyone, because everyone will have different things that they're drawn to. And one of the things that's been helpful for me is finding activities that are joyful and don't feel like a chore. So sometimes I love running, and other times it's exhausting and really strenuous and not something I want to be doing. And I think that can be true for a lot of people. And one of my favorite things to do for exercise is rock climbing. I really love the problem solving aspect of it. And I know that rock climbing is not accessible to everyone, especially right now. Most climbing gyms are closed, but I'm talking about that to kind of introduce the idea of finding those parts of exercise that might be more interesting to you than exercising for the exercise, that there might be problem solving or creativity that are embedded in those activities. So other ideas are things like dancing or swimming or roller skating. And there are so many different forms of activity that have creative or problem solving aspects that might be more interesting than just working out for the sake of exercising. And then I also just want to say that the way that you exercise and stay active doesn't have to look like other people's forms of activity. Because again, we're all going to be drawn to different things. We all have different physical abilities and capacities. And I really think that we can all find ways in our individual routines to incorporate some level of activity, whatever it is that we enjoy and are able to do. So why does it matter? Why does staying active matter, especially during quarantine? This is a time, and I've struggled with this too, where it's a little bit easier to stay inside and be on a screen a lot of the time and not spend a lot of time outside or staying physically active. But physical activity is really important for our physical and mental health. Some people think of physical activity as for weight loss specifically, and that can be an element of why people exercise, but it's certainly not the only reason. And having some form of physical activity can be really beneficial, regardless of whether it's for weight loss or whether it's just for maintaining your energy, your mood. It can also help a lot with falling and staying asleep at night, just getting some level of activity during the day. And then outdoor activities specifically can be really helpful because when you're out in the sun, you get vitamin D, which helps boost our immune systems, and that's especially important right now. Being outdoors can also help with focus and creativity, and I think especially when we're all spending a lot of time on Zoom calls, on different social media, it can be really helpful to take a break from that and get out for a walk or a hike, and just pay attention to the world around us instead of being on a screen just for a little while. So I would encourage people, depending on where you're starting out, to just experiment with different levels and forms of activity. So incorporating a 15-minute walk in your day, or biking to the store instead of driving, things like that, and then seeing how our bodies feel and being really mindful of that. And if you notice that your mood is better, your energy is better when you incorporate a little bit of activity, I think that can be a great way to motivate ourselves instead of having someone else tell us you need to exercise, or you should be working out or something like that. It really helps to have that internal motivation and notice how you feel as a result of doing those things. So I'm going to talk a bit about strategies for staying active during quarantine, during COVID. A lot of us are experiencing changes in our daily routines and are developing new routines. And some of the resources that we had access to before are really limited. For example, gyms are closed a lot of places. Different exercise groups or yoga classes, dance classes, things like that are not able to meet right now. So sometimes the outlets that people had before quarantine are very limited. So for most of the rest of the presentation, I'm going to talk about some ideas for COVID-friendly activities and things that we can do to stay safe doing those things indoors and outdoors. So a couple of ideas to start off with. I think it can be really helpful to have a person or a couple of people that you meet with regularly over Zoom to do different workouts or exercises together. And that could be doing a home workout. And I'll talk a little bit about those later and some different apps and things like that you can use for home workouts. Or it could just be somebody you talk with on the phone while you go for a walk, or you go for a bike ride or a run. It can be really helpful to have other people that you're in contact with to hold each other accountable, and to have some kind of social element to exercise that maybe we're missing out on. For me, for a little while, the climbing team I was on at school was all meeting together over Zoom to do workouts together. And that was really fun because it was the social element that we had before we all left school. So that was a great motivator for getting some exercise. So if you have a friend or a couple of friends, it might be a good idea to form a little group, and maybe you can do some stretching together, even with your camera off or something like that, to make it more comfortable, and just do some different exercises together, which I'll talk about more later. Another suggestion I have is listening to podcasts or music, or again, talking on the phone with somebody while you're exercising. And this could be while you're exercising at home, or while you're out for a walk or a run. And then I'll get more into home workout strategies later. And I wanted to say that exercise equipment at home can be really helpful if you have it. So like exercise bikes or weights, things like that. But they're certainly not the only way to exercise at home. And there are a lot of options if you don't have access to those things. But there are also ways to incorporate them into your routines. So I'm also going to talk a bit about safety. And there's this really handy list that I'm hoping Michael will send a link to in the chat from the New York Times that is rating different activities in the summer that you can do based on their risk of COVID exposure. And a couple things I wanted to pull out of that were that exercising outdoors and visiting a popular beach or pool are ranked as low risk. And this was really interesting because outside you can encounter a lot of people, but being in the open air can be a lot safer than if you were exercising in a gym. And I was kind of surprised to learn that visiting a beach with, it could have a lot of people, that's also fairly low risk because you're outdoors and because you can maintain distance most of the time. So I'm going to talk more about some safety tips. All right, so I already talked a bit about this, but exercising outdoors is a great safety tip. A lot of gyms are closed right now, so I know that's not even an option for a lot of people. But the airflow outside can help prevent the spread of COVID because we know now that it's transmitted through droplets in the air. And if there's continuous airflow and you're not spending very much time in close contact with people outdoors, that can be a safer option than exercising indoors with other people. If you're in your own home and it's with people in your quarantine bubble, I think that can definitely be an option as well. Another tip is to wear a mask. So even if you're outside, wearing a mask can help protect you and others. And one thing about these safety tips is that you're keeping yourself safe, but you're also keeping your community safe. We know that people can be asymptomatic carriers of COVID. So even if you feel fine, it can be a good idea to just take precautions when you're exercising and when you're around other people, so that you're not spreading germs that you might not even be aware that you're carrying to other people. So wearing a mask can kind of contain your breath, so other people aren't, for example, running through the cloud that you just breathed out, and it's the same for protecting yourself. Another tip is avoiding crowded areas. So I did just talk about how popular beaches can be safe depending on if you can maintain distance. I would say a good strategy is to come up with a backup plan. So if you're planning on going to a park, but you bike over there, drive over there, and it's really crowded, it's nice to have a backup plan where you can go to another park or an area that's a little bit less crowded. And I think this really depends on your own judgment and making sure you're keeping yourself safe, especially if you're somebody who's at higher risk for complications with COVID. Being aware of that and making sure that you feel safe and comfortable in those environments. So if you can choose between a really busy park and one that has some more space and you can get distance from people, that's definitely the safer option. And then finally, maintaining distancing. So if you're exercising outdoors, make sure you're maintaining 6 feet of distance between yourself and other people. And this is something I would see a lot at home, is when people are out running, sometimes they'll just go right around you and then they'll be running in front of you. And that's a little bit concerning to me, because they're breathing and if you're right behind them, you're kind of in their stream of droplets, and people running can be breathing really heavily. So if you're that person who's running or walking, make sure you're just giving other people a good amount of space, and being mindful of where you are in relation to other people. And these tips are all coming from the CDC guidelines for visiting parks and recreational facilities. And I think Michael will also share the link to that in the chat. So now I want to talk about some specific opportunities and ideas for outdoor activities in Milwaukee, and then other things you can do wherever you are. So in Milwaukee, one place that is really amazing and I love is called Alice's Garden. It's an urban farm in Milwaukee, and they're continuing to offer different events at the garden. One cool thing they have, and this photo here is from a Forge Outdoors event that we did at Alice's Garden, is they have this labyrinth it's a living labyrinth with plants and pathways, and it's made for walking meditations. So this can be a great way to get some outdoor exposure and some exercise. And I believe they're doing guided labyrinth walks, meditations, I think weekly, and you can find that information on their Facebook page. They're also offering yoga and different community readings on race and other topics. And I know that's not specific to exercise, but it's a great way to be involved in the community, especially if you want to participate in their other activities. Another option is the Urban Ecology Center. They offer a lot of different activities there. And we also, Forge Outdoors did an event, a hike at Riverside Park at the Urban Ecology Center. So they have some pretty extensive hiking trails that are open to the public. They also have community gardens, and they've been doing a summer meal program for families affected by COVID. You can find all of this information on their website as well. And they're starting up with planning for summer camps and curbside equipment rental. And this can be a really cool option because they allow you to pick up things like kayaks and other equipment that a lot of us don't have access to normally. And that's something they do usually not during quarantine, but it looks like they're going to start doing that soon. So that's a great option for summer activities. And then Wisconsin state parks are always a great place to go if you're looking to get a little bit out of the general area where you live and go for a hike and spend some time in nature. And most Wisconsin state parks are now open. Some have limited capacity. So if you look at their website, you can find more information about what areas near you are accessible and are open right now. So something that came up in a previous Ask session was about different workout and exercise apps. So I did a little bit of research about these, and some I've personally used and others just look really promising. So I put together some options if people are interested in different apps that help with exercising, some with getting outdoors, some are more home workout oriented. So one that I've used and I really like is called Map My Run. And this can actually be used for running, walking, biking, so it's not limited to just running. And this app tracks your the distance that you run or walk, your pace, calories burned, and it can be a really good way to keep track of how far you're moving, and it can be really motivating, I think, to see that. And it can also suggest routes. So if you're looking for a running path or just a nice walk, depending on the distance you want to go, it can be a great way to find those things. Another app is Nike Training Club. I have not used this one personally, but it offers different workouts, so you don't have to come up with the different activities you're doing on your own. They have different mobility exercises. They have some yoga. Some of them involve equipment at home, but others are just body weight exercises. So this can be a really good option if you're looking for a bit of guidance with your home workouts. A couple other apps that I found that looked really interesting were Yoga for Beginners and Daily Yoga. And these are both different yoga apps that give you different routines to do. I have not used them before, but they look really interesting. And I think a great way if you want to incorporate some stretching in your home or outside, and you don't have a lot of experience with yoga already, or if you do and you can no longer attend yoga classes and things like that. Another app I have used is called 7-Minute Workouts. This one is really cool because you can fit a whole workout into a short amount of time. So if you have a really busy schedule and you just have 10 or 15 minutes, you can still incorporate some activity into your day. And these are mostly body weight activities, so you don't have to have home workout equipment, which is really nice. And another app that's kind of different and fun is called Zombies Run. If you enjoy video games, this might be something that you would like. It's kind of a game-focused exercise app, and you can use it outside while you're walking or running. And you put in some headphones and it'll feed you kind of a storyline and different sound effects while you're out walking. And it encourages you to go a certain distance to reach certain benchmarks in the story. So that can be a really cool option if you're interested in doing something kind of interactive and fun while you exercise outside. And then I have a couple more outdoor activities options that involve using phone apps. One of them is the All Trails app. So this one allows you to find hiking locations nearby. This one can be really great if you'd like to go for a hike, but you don't really know where to start. These can all be things also that you do on your own, or you can do them with somebody in your bubble or at a distance with a friend. Another option is geocaching. This one might be also really interesting if you like games and problem solving. It's a great way to get outside. And I've done this a little bit, but it's basically a real life GPS enabled treasure hunt. So you use the geocaching app to find locations near you where people hide geocaches, which are these boxes that have different treasure items and a logbook. And the goal is to find these different geocaches in your area. So that can be really fun if you just want to explore in your neighborhood. And one that's a little bit out of the box, a little bit weird, is called Randonautica, and my dad and I did this together. And it's an app that generates random locations in your area, and you go to the random location. You can set a radius, and it might be down your street. It might be a little bit of a hike. We ended up on a beach. And it just takes you to these random locations, and the idea is to take a break from your regular routine and and do something a little bit out of the ordinary. There's also an element of mindfulness, I think, with people. You're encouraged to set an intention while you do this. And that's something that I think can be beneficial for any kind of outdoor activities, to just set an intention for what you'd like to get out of the experience. And that can be, to do something new and fun, or to be really mindful of how you're feeling. So that's something that I think can be incorporated into a lot of these activities. So those are most of the ideas that I've had for different outdoor activities that you could do during quarantine, different home workouts. There are a lot of options. So I wanted to open it up to questions, or if other people have suggestions for things that you'd like to do or you've done to stay active, and especially outdoor activities. So I'll open it up to that.
So just a reminder for folks, you can ask questions in the chat, or if you'd like to raise your hand, we can unmute your line to speak. So Caleb, one of the things that I noticed that you shown the app, the Map My Run app, and I noticed that that's an app that links to MyFitnessPal as well. There's like a lot of apps that link to each other. So if you're looking at like monitoring your food intake, those two apps will work really well together. So I think that's one of those other cool things, is that we can have apps that work together and we can track our activity, track our food intake, track our, we can track just about anything these days. So that's pretty cool. Are folks having questions that they'd specifically like to, have some dialogue about, hear Caleb's responses to? So the question is, I'm excited to try some. I'm unsure if Milwaukee County parks and beaches are open. So do you know?
So I'm not entirely sure. I think things are opening up in Milwaukee, but it probably depends on the specific beach. So I would suggest looking online for that information about the specific location you're interested in. But I think things are definitely opening up, for better, for worse. It can be really nice to have access to those spaces, as long as we're careful about distancing and things like that. So I don't know about specific specific places, but I would certainly look online in Milwaukee.
I did see an article recently that, like, around 4th of July, people are not allowed to picnic in Milwaukee County parks. So I think they're trying to like limit some of that. So I know that's at least one day that they're trying to keep folks from congregating. But other than that, I didn't see anything that was restrictive of the parks.
That's good to know.
So Lori's asking, does Zombies Run actually ask you to run?
So the name does have run in it, but from my understanding, and I've used it a little bit a long time ago, and I believe that you can use it for walking or running, and you don't actually have to run if you don't want to. And I think it's more about the distance that you're going, and kind of reaching different location benchmarks. But if you do like to run, it can be a really great way to do that, and maybe get some extra motivation, because I think there's some creepy sound effects and things like that.
That sounds really fantastic to me. That really sounds fun. It reminded me a little bit of the non-scary, like Pokemon Go, where people are like on an adventure, but it's just a little bit of a different kind of adventure. So that's really, really fantastic.
That's another great one too. I should have added that to the list.
I know my 25-year-old kid is really into Pokemon Go, and it's like, it's a cool thing. It's like you can go and look for things, and it takes you wherever you feel like moving. So that's kind of cool too. Caleb, you had mentioned before about not needing to necessarily have a lot of equipment at home, and I know you mostly talked about outside activity, but like people don't always have a bike to ride outside or inside, or don't have weights outside, inside. What are some of the things that people can do either outside or inside if they don't have a lot of stuff to work with?
Yeah, so some of the apps that I talked about, specifically 7-Minute Workouts and the Nike Training Club, have indoor workout, or I guess you could do them outside too, but home workouts that you can choose what equipment that you have to use for those. And a lot of those incorporate different body weight exercises. And yoga can also be a good option for that, and stretching, because you don't need a lot of equipment. Definitely for outside activities, I would say that walking and hiking are really great options if you don't have a bike or any other equipment, because you don't need any of that to just walk around your neighborhood. Running is also an option, but that can be a little bit more intensive, and it's not for everybody. It's not everybody's favorite thing to do, but it is a little bit, lower equipment than biking, for example.
Exactly. And I know when you did the summer program last year and there was a bike ride, or there were a couple of bike rides, you looked up like where to rent bikes. Like there's a lot of Bubbler bikes, and I'm blacking on what the other company was.
Yeah, I think Bubbler is the one, probably the most popular one in Milwaukee. But if you don't know about Bubbler bikes, they're bikes that you can rent, I believe, by the hour. Maybe it's shorter increments of time. So they do cost a little bit, but you can rent one of those at a certain location, and then you can take it to a different location at one of the Bubbler racks and drop it off. So if you're just going for a day bike ride, that can be a great way to get that experience without having to have a bike of your own.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, they were not that expensive to rent overall, so that is a really good option. So another question is, my daughter and I found that there are dance videos on YouTube that you can use, like Just Dance, good for those of us who enjoy to dance but aren't very coordinated. Yep, cool. And so Lori posted a link to the Just Dance on YouTube, which is great.
I haven't tried that yet, but I think it would be pretty fun.
Nice. What other questions or comments do people have? Are there apps that people like to use that, Caleb listed a few of them, and there are hundreds of apps that people use or like to use to stay motivated, to engage in mindfulness or activity. What do folks use? So is it Strava, another tracking app? What does it track?
I believe that's a running app too, and maybe you can use it for walking and biking as well, but yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Shelly is posting that Milwaukee added adaptive accessible bikes at the Bubbler stations last summer, which is really, really cool. So like hand bikes and bikes for two people. So that's really a neat addition. So another person is saying that they met their spouse because of Pokemon Go. Otherwise, I use MyFitnessPal and YouTube for with yoga with Adrian. Nice. And so, Caleb, you mentioned a little bit before about how like things like yoga or was it the 7-minute workouts use kind of your own body weight or your body as resistance. Would those be good for people that wanted to do more strength building or muscle building?
It definitely can be, because I think when you're doing exercises like push-ups, for example, or different ab exercises, things like that, it's not as cardio intensive, which you might get more of running or biking. So definitely if you're interested more in the body weight and like the strength aspect, I think those can be great. I think you can incorporate cardio, definitely doing jumping jacks and running in place, things like that. So there can be a mix of different forms of activity when you do those body weight home workouts.
That's cool. Because I know I was thinking about this before our call today that, some of the folks that have been regularly attending are both on the younger age spectrum and on the older age spectrum, and not to be ageist about anything, but like as people get older, like me, we lose our body mass, we lose muscle mass. So, sometimes finding activities that will increase our muscle mass is really important, as well as something that's cardiovascular. So. I'm kind of curious about, you mentioned something in the very beginning that I found really, really poignant, which is that you like to find activities that bring you joy. So it reminded me of like, I'm blocking on her name right now, the person that does house organizing, that she talks about like saving things and only keeping the things that bring you joy. Can you talk a little bit about like how do you think about the joy piece of that when you think about movement?
Yeah, I think of it as a motivating factor for exercise. Um, I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with staying motivated to exercise or to be active, because the messages that we get about it a lot of the times are centered around weight loss, or exercise as a chore or something that you have to do. Um, and I think finding activities that are enjoyable, aside from the health benefits of it, but you just intrinsically enjoy doing that activity, um, can be a really great motivator instead of having somebody else tell you that you should be doing it, or feeling like you have to. And that's going to be different for everyone. And some people really like to dance, and that's a great way to get exercise and do something you really enjoy. Um, I've had some friends who've gotten really into roller skating, going into the summer because it's something they can like improve at and build that skill. Um, some people really love swimming. For me, hiking is another great one that you can do without a lot of equipment. Um, and to just be in nature can be kind of meditative. Um, and that's something that is really enjoyable for me and as an exercise. And I think that's a really important piece of it, that if you're not enjoying the kind of exercise that you're doing, the way your body feels while you're doing it or after, and you're bored, then you're probably not going to be able to do that activity very long term. So finding the things that are really enjoyable to balance maybe the more challenging or more strenuous activity, I think is a really great way to do that.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and that kind of bounces off too of what you were saying before about how, some kinds of movement or activities are like more creative, some are more like problem solving, some are more just physical, some are social, some are more isolated or introspective. So it's like, whatever brings you joy that day might be different than the next day. So that's kind of a cool thing if you have a repertoire of things to pick from. Yeah.
Definitely. And I also think of that there's slightly different forms of exercise. There's some things that, like running for me, gets me really out of breath and tired, and kind of pushes the limits of what I'm able to do. But then afterwards, I feel really good and my energy is really good. But that's not something I want to do every day. But every day I can go for a walk or I can bike around a little bit. So I think there's a balance too. Some people really enjoy those more intense exercises, but there's also a way to incorporate more relaxed, more activities that are a little bit more easy, into your daily routine without being totally wiped out all the time.
That makes sense. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about how right now it's a really stressful time. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on that's really stressful, and I think some people really do like to go out and run or be really physical because it feels like it's a release of some of that tension, that emotional and literal physical tension that people are experiencing right now. So yeah, it might be really exhausting, but it might feel really good to kind of get that out and then come home and take a nice cool shower or whatever it is to kind of literally chill that out. So it makes a lot of sense. I'm wondering about a couple things, and I know that you're not the medical expert of the world, but I had a couple of COVID related questions, and I'm waiting for folks if folks have other questions too in the chat. But a lot of times when we're outside, we sweat or we get hot. And, I know at least I want to wipe my face off. And one of the things that we're kind of not supposed to do right now is touch our face. Do you have ideas of how people can, either not sweat, which is impossible, or be able to kind of dry ourselves off without putting us more at risk for COVID related things?
That's a really good question. And I think as it gets hotter, it's more difficult to do things that aren't, that don't make you sweaty. Um, I definitely have that issue too. And I think it really depends on where you're exercising. So if you're going for a run or a walk, for example, and you're getting really hot, if you're in an area that's not super busy, and you bring maybe like a towel or a headband or something like that, that can be helpful. And if you're touching your face and you haven't touched contaminated things, and you're not surrounded by people, that's definitely, it seems safer to me, and I'm not an expert on this, but like my personal assessment of that risk compared to if I had just been touching like a bike rack or something that somebody else might have touched, or I'm running in an area where there's like a lot of cross traffic and I don't want to like put germs on my face. I would be more concerned about it in that kind of an environment. So if it's something that's more strenuous, I would say trying to stay a little bit in a less popular area and being mindful about what you've touched recently and maybe hand sanitizing in between.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. If you do your hands with some hand sanitizer first, wipe your head or your face off, and then go back and continue your activity. So yeah, and I'm seeing in the chat people are suggesting the 1970s, 1980s really sexy sweatbands or whatever across your forehead. So, and those of us who have less hair, it's like, the sweat kind of runs down a little bit more. So sweatbands are a great idea as well. So cool. Do folks have other questions or comments?
I had another thing to add while people are thinking, Michael, based on something you said about how running or similar activities can be a great way to deal with stress. If people are feeling a lot of that. Another thing I just wanted to add is that we're living through a time that's not normal, even though we're learning to adapt to it and finding new routines. A lot of people are missing their normal outlets for exercise, like going to the gym. And I think for our mental health, it's important to not beat ourselves up over not having access to those same things, and not trying to emulate the same experience that we had before. So, I'm not getting as much exercise as I was when I could go to a climbing gym and have different social interactions around exercise. And that's something I've kind of just had to accept and find other ways that are enjoyable for me to exercise, but they're not the same. And I think it can be really stressful to have that change and to not be able to do the things you could before. But, it's a different situation, and we have to be gentle with ourselves around that and realize that we're doing our best to take care of ourselves in this situation.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And, it's like it's both like a new opportunity for us to create a different pattern, but we all also have to be really, really, kind to ourselves because, it's just a different world and it's a really stressful world. And we don't need to add more self-stress on top of the world stress and things. And it's interesting, Caleb, you're saying that you're getting less maybe activity. And I know like in my life and I look around my neighborhood, I'm seeing folks getting more activity because like they're home with their kids or they're not going to work. So they're like actually going out and walking more. I'm out walking more than I had been for a while. So like, I think that sometimes folks are actually doing more and some other folks are doing less. And, it's all good no matter what you can do and how you can do it.
Yeah, I think some people are having more free time in their daily lives to get out for a walk or a bike ride or something like that, which is great. And it really depends on, what people's routines were before and what they are now. And I think what you said is, it's a great opportunity to form a new routine and maybe do those things that we've been wanting to spend our time doing that we didn't have the option to before.
Exactly. I am seeing a hand up, so I am going to unmute. Oops. Hang on a second. Go ahead, Marky.
This is Lori. It looks to me like Marky is still on mute.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Okay. I've been sitting around the house for the last 3 months and so forth, and I definitely feel it. And for various reasons that I didn't get up and move and walk and do the things that I needed to do, and kind of like I atrophied. My muscles feel like they've shrunk and gotten weaker and so forth. But of all the suggestions, because I'm a person of a certain age, shall we say, I need to start stretching because I've got arthritis in the back and all over my legs, and I've got cardiac problems, so I need to start walking at a lesser interval than I normally would. I normally go 30 minutes a day to begin with, so I need to start with 10 or 15. But my problem is when I get going, because I'm a former athlete, I take my training like I'm training like a world class athlete getting ready for the Olympics or something, and I'm of that certain age and I can't do it anymore. Let's put it this way: I'm not 21 any longer, and I need to set some sort of a goal as to what I'm going to do on a daily basis, and then do it, and then leave it at that. Do you have any suggestions as to how to have a realistic expectation once you start out? Otherwise, if I get going and start failing in what I wanted to do, I'm just going to quit, and I don't need to do that. I need to get healthy again.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Marky. And it sounds like you have a really good awareness of how it feels to maybe not be getting the same level of activity as you were before quarantine, and how your body feels with that, and that you do want to be doing some other things and incorporating that into your life. But I relate to that being difficult to have the motivation and set goals that are reasonable and achievable. And I think it really depends on each person's own, what you enjoy doing and what you're able to do, because there's a balance between those. So I think, and it sounds like you also enjoy walking, and that's something you'd like to do. And I really think setting a routine can be helpful for that. And a goal maybe to walk for a certain amount of time every day at a really leisurely pace. So maybe if it's not 30 minutes, now it could be 15 minutes or 10 minutes. And I think you also said before, you enjoyed seeing sunsets or sunrises, and maybe that could be part of a motivation for that, to get out to see the sunset, and have a little walk, and maybe encouraging yourself to do that every day or 3 times a week, and setting goals that in the moment feel achievable, and then as you work to those, it may become easier to work up to what you would ideally like to be doing, and spending more time walking, or stretching, things like that.
That was a really great question. Caleb, you mentioned before a word that I really have liked hearing, to talk about, like your bubble of people that you're kind of connected with and you're choosing to spend face-to-face time with. I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more about kind of physical activity and how to stay safe when people are kind of maybe on the outskirts of your bubble, or, like kind of where we can be with people and how we can be safer if we want to exercise or be outdoors with people.
That's a really good question, too, because I think a lot of us have our immediate bubble and people that we are technically quarantining with, like our family, or maybe we're living with roommates or friends, that we are exposed to. So those are people I think that you could, do just about anything with when you're exercising, and probably not worry about it if you're already exposed to each other, like going on a run together or exercising indoors together even. But then, Michael, I think you were talking more about people who are, friends that don't live with us, and we don't really want to share exposure if we can avoid it. And I think definitely one of the things that, like my housemates and I have agreed on, is if you're going to do that kind of thing with somebody who's not in our living bubble, to make sure it's outside. And we've already talked about, exercising outside, and maintaining distance too. And I believe in a past session, we also talked about how, it's running, like if you're running or walking, it might be better to be side by side with somebody than directly behind them. So if it's somebody that you don't want to share exposure with, that you're not breathing in their air that they've just breathed out behind them, or vice versa. So next to each other, ideally 6 feet apart. And wearing a mask can also be really helpful, even if you're outside, I think. And I know some activities are harder to do with that, like running with a mask on can be a little bit more challenging, and doesn't work for some people. But I think ideally, and if you're really wanting to make sure that you and that person are staying safe and distanced, I think it can be a good thing to strive for, to wear a mask. And then I feel like this is kind of implied, but probably if you're gonna meet up with someone to exercise with who's not in your immediate family or your bubble, to only meet up with one person at a time, so that you're not bringing a bunch of people with different exposure together in a big group. Even though we might love to do that, I would love to do a workout with all of my friends and have us all get together, but I think that can definitely be riskier than having a distance walk or a distance run with one other person.
Yeah, that's a perfect answer. And yeah, we did talk about it the other day with Annie from the medical college. And yeah, I think like walking or running parallel is a great idea. But that, that also kind of implies that, maybe we should be picking the parks to walk in that we can stand, 6 feet apart or walk 6 feet apart, versus like maybe a hiking trail where it's a lot narrower. So we may want to cater our activities to be places that we can actually socially distance and be safe in that way. So yeah, we can think about those things. What's safe, and how do we feel safe, and what do we know about science and all that good stuff. So another question in the chat right now is, what do you think about keeping a written journal or log about physical activity?
I think that can be a really great way to kind of hold yourself to a certain routine. If one of your goals is to have a regular routine, which I think can be really helpful for motivation and for getting regular exercise, is to come up with a schedule. Like these days, I will go for a walk during this time when I have a little bit of free time after lunch or something like that. And then writing that down so that you have a log of what you've been able to do. That can also be a great way to see if your goals are reasonable. Like if you set certain expectations for yourself and it's not working with your schedule, or you're not able to walk for that amount of time, and seeing that what you did achieve, it's showing you what you are able to do, which is awesome, even if it's not what you originally intended. And then you can also change those goals based on what you're seeing that fits in your schedule, fits within your physical ability. And also, I think it's really great to see a visual representation of the things that you've achieved. So Shelly, I think that's a really great idea for motivation and for keeping track of how you're moving.
That reminds me of something which is kind of the opposite of that. And I think we've talked about this on one of our other sessions about keeping a calendar that it's so not your regular calendar, but like a calendar that you can enter like what you want to do on a certain day. So like, hey, I want to go geocaching one day. And so like that gets actually calendared. So rather than writing a log of what you've done, but kind of like writing a calendar of like what you would like to do. And again, kind of those things to build on what you were saying, Kilo, about like, finding those things that bring you joy. So like, what happens if you put those on the calendar and you make a commitment to like going and doing something that you really enjoy doing? So it's kind of the opposite of logging what you've done, but different things work for different people about how to stay motivated.
And I think those things can go together really well too. And planning, like ideally, this is what I'd like to do today. I love to do that and have a list of, these are tasks I need to get done. These are things I really want to do, and trying to schedule times for all of those things. And then you also then have a record of like, this is what I got done today. And to look back and feel really proud of having gotten those things done. And I think at the beginning of the day, or maybe even farther out, writing a list or a schedule of those things that you do want to achieve, at least for me, that can be really helpful. And I think for people who like to-do lists and having a structured schedule, that can be really great.
And I know not everybody does, but some of us do really love that. So that's really cool. I know we're getting close to the end of our time, so I want to make sure that if anybody has a question, they can pop one in. I did have one last question that I've been thinking a lot about, which is that I know like a lot of trans folks feel unsafe going in public or being in public or worry about their safety. And I'm wondering if you have suggestions for how people can maintain feelings of safety and actual safety if they're out doing physical activity in public.
That can be, I know, a really big concern for people. And as well as that, I think there's also a concern about being seen and perceived in public sometimes, and maybe that not being perceived the way you want to be can be a factor that gets in the way of people feeling safe going outside. And I think one suggestion I have is having a buddy, having somebody that you go outside with, and you maybe schedule routine times that you walk together, and it could be a distance walk if it's not somebody in your bubble. And then also, I think exploring different areas that have fewer people or that feel safer. Maybe they're areas that are closer to where you live, so that if you feel unsafe and need to leave, that you have an exit plan. I think definitely going with another person, and that can be limited right now during quarantine, but planning with another person can help to hold you accountable for doing those things, but also to have somebody that you feel safe with, and then finding locations that are easy to get out of if you need to, maybe not super busy, a level of traffic that you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, that's a perfect answer. And, as Forge does a lot of work with anti-violence, so, this is something that I think about a lot, which is, having a safety app on your phone, or walking maybe in, I don't want to say more congested areas, but like walking in areas where there's a lot more car traffic, or things that might feel that you're not as isolated if you're worried about harassment or involvement from others, that somebody might see you if you're on a busier street and be able to intervene if something does happen. But yeah, those are really great suggestions. And like you mentioned in the very beginning, you could be on the phone with somebody, so you don't even have to be walking in person with them or running. You could have them on the phone with you, and that's just another level of connection, so you can feel a little bit more secure that way.
And that would be a great way also to let somebody know if you feel unsafe, if you have them on the phone, or maybe there's somebody who's not out with you, but you tell them, I'm going to text you my location, and like when I leave and when I get back. And if I don't text you, then I need some help, or, things like that, to have somebody who's watching out for you, even if they're not physically with you.
Exactly. Yeah. So those are all great ideas, and that might be a really great next session, is to talk a little bit about that, feelings of safety and some of those options that we have that can make it both fun and safe to be in the outdoors during these times. And I'm seeing there's another suggestion of like, maybe have Lyft on your phone so you can call for a ride if you need to. Yep. Lots of ways that we can increase our safety, and so we can still do the things that we want to do. Kayla, before we close, do you have any parting wonderful thoughts in addition to what you've already shared with us?
I'm just glad that everybody's here, and I saw some really great, I haven't gotten a chance to read all of the chat, but I think people have a lot of great ideas that I haven't talked about or haven't even thought of. And that's amazing. That's really great. So that, I guess those are my parting words. I'm really excited, and I think people have a lot of ideas that on this topic that are really helpful. And I hope that people will, just try out a few things. And again, mindfulness of how our bodies feel when we're doing those things can be a great motivator. So just trying some new things out and see how you feel.
And I think a lot of us are going to go look at the Zombie app. So, that sounds really fun, right? So it's really, really some cool ideas. And I bet, there are other things too that people can like tap onto. So I think that a lot of people feel really inspired and motivated. So thank you for doing that part of your job too, which was probably like an unanticipated benefit of our time. So thank you definitely for doing that. I just wanted to thank everybody for being here today and for, taking out a little bit of time out of the not so sunny afternoon. We do have a bunch of activities that are coming up that many of you already know about. So just to review a little bit about what's coming up next week. On Tuesday, we have Healthy at Every Size. So kind of building off of what Caleb said about like, you don't have to be like super fit. You don't have to do whatever, but how can we be healthy at no matter what size we're at? That's going to be with Annie from the medical college. Caleb is going to do another session on Wednesday, so fermented sodas, which I am super excited about, and he knows that, but I think it'll be really fun. And then on Thursday, we're going to have just a really chill session of doing some coloring, like group coloring together by Zoom and chatting. So kind of free form with all of that. And Friday, we'll have a game day with Matthew Lewis, who will lead us in some games. And then next Saturday, I'm really excited about this as well. We've got two folks, Jeff Whittle from the medical college. No, not from the medical college. Lori, remind me where Jeff Whittle is from.
He is from the medical college and is currently working with the VA.
Got it. Thank you. So he's part of the All of Us program, which is kind of linked to PrideNet. So we'll have Mari Bahati, which is I think how they say their name.
Yep.
Talking about, can my health history help solve the COVID crisis? So looking at health research and the implications of that. So that will be a really fun session with some folks from out of state as well as some folks in the state. So that is the list of what's coming up. When we close out today, you'll see an evaluation. We'd really appreciate your input in knowing where we can head in the future and what you thought about today's session. So thank you, Caleb, for doing a smashingly good job, like I expected you would, but it was fantastic. And thanks everybody for spending your afternoon with us. And thank you, Jill, for interpreting, like always. Have a great day, everybody.